The rabid pit bull tore the alien's throat out in one savage leap, blood splattering the bulkheads and dripping from the dog's snarling jaws. What should have been a routine passenger flight had quickly turned into a brutal bloodbath the moment the Barzans tried to separate a human from his loyal canine. A shell-shocked Raxa slouched on a stool in a dimly lit dive bar on the Barzan homeworld, his haggard face illuminated by the flickering neon signs advertising cheap booze. His longtime friend and fellow military officer, Zoltar, slid onto the neighboring seat, eyeing Raxa with concern. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Zoltar remarked. "What's eating you?" Raxa knocked back his drink in one swift gulp and waved the bartender over for a refill. He swiveled to face Zoltar, his expression haunted. Zoltar nodded. "Yeah, friendly guy. Did good work on the ships. Why?" "I was on the shuttle he took back to Earth last cycle." Raxa's voice quavered. "I'll never make the mistake of underestimating a human or their pets again, not after what I saw." Zoltar leaned in, intrigued. What the hell happened? Taking a shaky breath, Raxa began to recount the horrific tale. "It all started when we made an unscheduled stop at a remote trading post on the edge of Barzan space. A few of our soldiers tried to board and confiscate the human's dog. That's when all hell broke loose." Raxa shuddered, reliving the grisly memories seared into his mind. The alien crew had mere seconds to regret their fatal decision before the human and his dog painted the shuttle's interior crimson. Mankind's bond with canines ran far deeper than the Barzans ever fathomed, and now as whispers spread of the shocking incident, the galaxy would soon learn the bloody consequences of tampering with a human's beloved pet. Raxa leaned back, taking a swig of his drink. "So there we were, stopped at this shitty little outpost. Sean gets off the shuttle with his dog Brutus to walk around a bit. Big-ass Rottweiler, that dog. Brutus was a beast." Zoltar nodded. "I remember. Sean loved that dog, went everywhere with him." "Yeah, well, some Krazax mercs didn't get the memo about fucking with a human's dog. They walked right up to Sean and Brutus, poking at the dog with a rifle." Raxa shook his head. "One of them said something like, 'I heard these hairless earth apes keep these things as pets. Bet it'd make a good snack.' Sean, cool as ever, just tells them to back off." "Let me guess they didn't listen?" Zoltar asked. "Course not." Laughed in his face and shoved Sean aside. Then the dumbass leader grabs Brutus by the collar, saying he wondered what the dog's pelt would sell for. Raxa grimaced. That's when Brutus went apeshit. Latched right onto the Krazax's arm. Fucker screamed like a stuck pig, dropped his gun and everything. Zoltar whistled. "Damn, what did the other mercs do?" "Oh, they tried to shoot Brutus. Figured they'd put the dog down, but Sean? He moved so fucking fast, Zoltar. Took out all three of them before they could get a shot off. Precise hits right in the arms and heads. Disabled them completely." "Holy shit, and the leader?" Still trying to shake Brutus off his arm, Sean just walks over, calm as you please, picks up a rifle and bam! Raxa mimed shooting a gun. Right in the head. Merc goes down. Brutus lets go. Dog trots back to Sean, blood all over his snout. And Sean, he just points the rifle at the mercs on the ground and says, "No one fucks with my dog." Zoltar gaped at Raxa. "Fucking hell, I knew humans were protective of their pets, but that's insane. What happened after that?" Raxa took another swig of his drink, the alcohol burning his throat. He shook his head, still marveling at the events that had unfolded. "Well, as you can imagine, the commotion attracted quite a bit of attention. Before we knew it, a crowd had gathered around the scene, including a group of Barzan traders who had been in the middle of negotiating some deal with the Krazax mercs." Zoltar leaned forward, his eyes widening. "Oh shit, the Barzans were there. Those guys are always so uptight about their precious trading relationships." "Exactly," Raxa said, nodding. "They demanded to know what the hell had happened, and when they found out that Sean had killed one of the Krazax and injured the others, they were absolutely furious. Started yelling about how Sean had violated their laws and disrupted their business dealings." Zoltar scoffed. "Like they actually give a damn about the law, they just care about their profits." "Too true," Raxa agreed. Anyway, the Barzans were demanding that Sean be arrested and handed over to them for punishment. But Sean, cool as a fucking cucumber, just looked them straight in the eye and said, "The only law that matters here is the law of nature. And in nature, when you threaten someone's pack, you pay the price." Zoltar let out a low whistle. "Damn, that's badass. What did the Barzans say to that?" Raxa chuckled. Oh, they sputtered and fumed, threatening to report the incident to the authorities, but Sean just smiled and said, "Go ahead. I'm sure they'll be very interested to hear about how you're doing business with a bunch of low-life mercenaries who think it's fun to torture animals." "Holy shit," Zoltar said, shaking his head in disbelief. "He really said that to their faces?" "Yep," Raxa confirmed, a note of admiration in his voice. The Barzans realized pretty quickly that pursuing the matter would only shine a light on their own shady dealings. They backed down and left the trading post in a hurry, not wanting to risk any unwanted attention. Zoltar leaned back in his chair, processing the incredible tale. "I always knew humans were protective of their pets, but I never realized the lengths they would go to defend them," he said thoughtfully. Zoltar listened intently as Raxa recounted the aftermath of the incident at the trading post. He leaned forward, his interest piqued by the unexpected turn of events. "The Interstellar Trade Commission got involved?" Zoltar asked incredulously. "I thought they usually stayed out of these kinds of disputes." Raxa nodded, his expression serious. "Normally they do, but apparently the Barzans had been on their radar for a while. They just needed something concrete to pin on them, and Sean's run-in with the Krasaks gave them the perfect opportunity." "So what did they want from you?" Zoltar inquired, his brow furrowed. "They asked me to give a detailed account of what happened at the trading post," Raxa explained. "I told them everything, from the moment the Krasaks approached Sean and Brutus to the way Sean took them down when they threatened his dog." Zoltar let out a low whistle. "I bet the Barzans weren't too happy about that." Raxa scoffed. "That's putting it mildly. They were absolutely livid. They tried to discredit both me and Sean, claiming that we'd made the whole thing up to sabotage their business dealings." "But the ITC didn't buy it?" "Not for a second," Raxa confirmed. "They had video footage from the trading post's security cameras that corroborated our story. The Barzans didn't have a leg to stand on." Zoltar shook his head in disbelief. "Serves them right for getting involved with scum like the Krasaks. What happened to them in the end?" Raxa took a final swig of his drink before answering. "The ITC revoked their trading license and slapped them with a bunch of fines and sanctions. They'll be lucky if they can ever do business in this sector again." "And Sean?" Zoltar asked, his curiosity getting the better of him. "How did he react to all of this?" A wry smile tugged at the corners of Raxa's mouth. "That's the thing, Zoltar. Sean didn't seem to give a damn about any of it. When I asked him why he did what he did, he just shrugged and said, 'I wasn't trying to be a hero or anything. I was just protecting my friend. That's what you do for the ones you love.'" Zoltar sat back in his chair, marveling at the human's unwavering loyalty to his canine companion. "You know, Raxa, I've heard a lot of stories about the bond between humans and their dogs, but I never really understood it until now." Raxa nodded in agreement, his gaze distant as he reflected on the events that had transpired. "It's something else, isn't it? The way they'll go to any lengths to protect each other, even if it means putting their own lives on the line." "It's more than just a pet-owner relationship," Zoltar mused, his voice tinged with a newfound respect. "It's like they're part of the same pack, bound by a loyalty that runs deeper than blood." Raxa hummed thoughtfully, his mind wandering back to the image of Sean standing over the fallen Krasaks, his rifle trained on their prone forms as Brutus stood at his side, blood dripping from his powerful jaws. "You know, I've seen a lot of things in my time, Zoltar, but I don't think I'll ever forget the look in Sean's eyes when he said those words." "What do you mean?" Zoltar asked, leaning in closer, his interest piqued. Raxa paused for a moment, searching for the right words to describe the intensity he had witnessed in the human's gaze. It was like he was ready to take on the whole damn universe if it meant keeping Brutus safe. There was no fear, no hesitation, just a kind of... Zoltar nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. I remember hearing about that. Sean and Brutus were walking through the marketplace, just taking in the sights and sounds of the Barzan homeworld. It was their first time there, so everything was new and fascinating to them. Raxa leaned in, intrigued. What happened next? Well, as they were walking, they came across this group of street kids, scrawny little things, looked like they hadn't had a proper meal in weeks. They were trying to sell these creatures they had captured, half-starved, sickly-looking things. Most people just walked right by, but not Sean. Zoltar continued. Sean stopped to talk to the kids, found out they were orphans living on the streets, barely scraping by. It broke his heart seeing them like that. So you know what he did? What? He bought all the creatures from them, every last one. Paid way more than they were worth, too. Then he took the kids to a nearby food stall and bought them a proper meal. You should have seen their faces, Raxa. They were so grateful. Raxa smiled, picturing the scene in his mind. That sounds like something Sean would do. He always had a soft spot for the underdog. Zoltar nodded. But here's the really amazing part. After they finished eating, Sean took the kids to a local shelter and made sure they had a safe place to stay. Then he went back to the marketplace and used his own money to buy supplies and medicine for the creatures, nursing them back to health. Wow, Raxa said, shaking his head in amazement. He didn't have to do all that. No, he didn't, but that's just who he is. He even found homes for some of the creatures with other humans who lived on the Barzan homeworld. And then, get this, he started a program to help other street kids, using the money he earned from his job at the spaceport. Raxa's eyes widened. Really, what kind of program? He taught them how to care for animals, gave them jobs helping out at the shelter he had set up for the creatures. It was incredible, Raxa. These kids who had nothing, suddenly they had a purpose, a reason to wake up every day. Raxa whistled lowly, impressed. I had no idea he was doing all that. It's amazing when you think about it. Here's this human, light years away from his own planet, and he's going out of his way to help a bunch of alien kids and animals that most people would just ignore. Zoltar sat back in his chair, a look of admiration on his face. That's just the kind of person Sean is. He sees suffering, and he can't just walk away from it. He has to do something, even if it's not his problem. Raxor nodded, lost in thought. You know, I've met a lot of humans over the years, some good, some bad. But Sean, he's different. There's something special about him. I agree, Zoltar said. He's got a heart as big as a supernova, and the courage to match it. Zoltar grinned. How could I forget? He just walked right up to their leader, cool as a comet, and... Zoltar leaned forward, his eyes alight with a sudden realization. You know, Raxa, I think Sean's actions had a bigger impact than he ever could have imagined. A few months after he started that program for the street kids, word got back to me that the Barzan government had taken notice. Raxa's eyebrows shot up in surprise. The government, really? They actually paid attention to what some outsider was doing. Zoltar nodded eagerly. They were impressed, Raxa, impressed by what Sean had managed to accomplish in such a short time. They decided to provide funding and support to expand the program to help even more kids and animals in need. Well, I'll be damned, Raxa muttered, shaking his head in disbelief. That's not all, Zoltar continued. They even passed new laws, Raxa. Laws to protect the rights of orphaned children and to crack down on animal cruelty. Can you believe it? Raxa sat back in his chair, stunned. I had no idea the government got involved like that. That's a pretty big deal, considering how they usually feel about outsiders meddling in their affairs. Exactly, Zoltar agreed. But I think they realized that Sean was doing something truly valuable for their society, something they couldn't ignore. Raxa took a swig of his drink, mulling over this new information. And the other humans on the Barzan homeworld, did they get involved too? Zoltar grinned. You bet they did. They started volunteering their time and resources to help out with the program. They saw what Sean was doing and wanted to be a part of it, to make a difference just like he was. So what happened? Did the program keep growing? Like you wouldn't believe, Zoltar said. Before long it had grown into a full-fledged organization, with multiple shelters and outreach centers across the planet, all because of one man and his dog, standing up for what they believed in. Raxa sat back in his chair, marveling at the ripple effect of Sean's actions. It's amazing to think about how much of a difference one person can make just by caring enough to take action. Zoltar nodded, his expression thoughtful. You know, I heard a rumor that the Barzan president herself visited one of the shelters a few weeks ago. Apparently she was so moved by what she saw that she pledged even more government support for the program. Raxa's eyes widened. The president? Seriously? That's huge. I know, Zoltar said. And get this, she even met with Sean personally to thank him for everything he had done. Can you imagine? A lowly human mechanic sitting down with the leader of an entire alien world? Raxor shook his head in amazement. I bet that was a hell of a conversation. What I wouldn't give to have been a fly on the wall for that meeting. Zoltar chuckled. From what I heard, Sean was his usual humble self. He just shrugged and said he was doing what anyone would have done in his situation. Zoltar raised his glass in a toast. To Sean and Brutus, the most unlikely of heroes. May their legacy continue to inspire others to do good in this messed-up universe of ours. Raxo clinked his glass against Zoltar's. I'll drink to that, my friend, I'll drink to that. As the two aliens sat in the dimly lit bar, sipping their drinks and reflecting on the incredible story they had just shared, they couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at the power of one human's compassion and courage. In a galaxy so often filled with darkness and cruelty, Sean and Brutus had shown that a single spark of kindness could ignite a flame of hope that would burn bright for generations to come. Zoltar set his empty glass down on the bar, a wistful smile playing at the corners of his mouth. You know, Raxa, I've been thinking, maybe we've been looking at humans all wrong this whole time. Maybe they're not just some primitive, violent species, like we've always assumed. Raxa arched an eyebrow, intrigued by his friend's sudden change in perspective. What do you mean? Raxor leaned back in his seat, a look of astonishment crossing his weathered face. Well, I'll be damned. Who would have thought that one human's actions could have such far-reaching consequences? Zoltar nodded, a hint of admiration in his voice as he replied, It's truly remarkable, isn't it? Sean's compassion and dedication not only changed lives on the Barzan homeworld, but also sparked a galactic movement towards the humane treatment of animals. I can only imagine the resistance the Earth delegation must have faced at the Galactic Council, Raxa mused, his brow furrowed in thought. I mean, getting all those different species to agree on anything is like herding a bunch of drunken Krazaks. A chuckle escaped Zoltar's lips at the comparison. You're not wrong there, my friend, but from what I heard, the humans were relentless in their pursuit. They came armed with data, case studies, and even testimonials from various species who had witnessed the positive impact of Sean's work. Raxa's eyes widened as he listened intently to Zoltar's recounting of the events. They must have put in a hell of a lot of work to build a case that strong. I can't even begin to fathom the amount of research and coordination that went into it. Indeed, Zoltar agreed, taking another sip of his drink. And it wasn't just the Earth delegation either. Word of Sean's actions had spread far and wide, inspiring others to take up the cause. Species that had once been at odds with one another found common ground in their desire to protect the welfare of animals. Raxor shook his head in disbelief, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. It's amazing how one act of kindness can ripple out and touch so many lives. Sean probably had no idea the impact he would have when he first started helping those street kids and their pets. That's the thing about compassion, Raxa, Zoltar said, his voice taking on a thoughtful tone. It has the power to transcend borders, species, and even galaxies. And when someone like Sean comes along and sets an example, it can inspire others to be their best selves and work towards a better future for all. Raxa raised his glass, a newfound respect for the human race reflected in his eyes. To Sean and the countless others like him, who have the courage to stand up for what's right, no matter the odds. Zoltar clinked his glass against Raxa's, a sense of hope and unity filling the air between them, and to the enduring bond between humans and their animals, a bond that has the power to change the universe. Zoltar's eyes widened as he listened to Raxa's tale, his curiosity piqued by the ingenuity and determination Sean had displayed. How long did it take him to transform that old warehouse into a livable space? He asked, leaning forward in his seat. Raxa scratched his chin thoughtfully. It wasn't an overnight process, that's for sure. Sean spent weeks working on the place, sometimes late into the night. He'd come back to the spaceport covered in dirt and grease, but always with a smile on his face. I can only imagine the challenges he must have faced, Zoltar mused. Retrofitting an old building like that couldn't have been easy, especially with limited resources. Raxa nodded in agreement. You're right about that. But Sean never let it discourage him. He'd scour the junkyard for hours, looking for anything he could repurpose or repair. I remember one time he found an old generator that had been discarded by some Krazax traders. It was in pretty rough shape, but Sean managed to get it working again. That generator ended up powering the whole warehouse for months. Zoltar shook his head in amazement. That's incredible. It's no wonder word started to spread about what he was doing. It really was something special, Raxa said, a note of admiration in his voice. Before long, other humans started showing up at the warehouse, looking for a place to stay. Some of them even brought their own pets, cats, birds, even a few exotic creatures from other worlds. Sean welcomed them all with open arms. He must have had his hands full, managing a growing community like that, Zoltar remarked. Raxa chuckled. You could say that again, but Sean never seemed to mind. He was always there to lend a helping hand, whether it was fixing a leaky roof or mediating a dispute between neighbors. And Brutus, of course, was always by his side. That dog became a bit of a mascot for the whole community. Zoltar smiled, picturing the burly Rottweiler trotting alongside Sean as he went about his daily tasks. I can imagine. It sounds like they made quite the team. They really did, Raxa agreed. And you know, it wasn't just humans who benefited from what Sean was doing. Word started to spread among the Barzan population too. Some of them were curious about these strange creatures that the humans kept as companions. A few even started coming around to the warehouse, just to see what all the fuss was about. Zoltar's eyebrows shot up in surprise. Really? I wouldn't have thought the Barzans would be interested in mingling with outsiders like that. Raxa leaned in, intrigued by this new development in Sean's story. So how exactly did Sean approach these Barzan kids? I can't imagine they were too thrilled about some human getting in their business. Zoltar chuckled. You're right about that. When Sean first went out to talk to them, they were pretty hostile. They mocked him, called him names, even threw a few rocks. But Sean, he just stood there calmly, letting them vent their anger. Sounds like Sean, Raxa said with a nod. He always did have a way of keeping his cool in tense situations. Exactly. And that's what got through to these kids. When they saw that Sean wasn't going to fight back or call the cops on them, they started to listen. He asked them about their lives, their families, what they wanted to be when they grew up. Raxa's eyes widened. Wait, so he actually got them to open up just like that? Zoltar shrugged. Sean's always been good with people. He has this way of making you feel like he genuinely cares about what you have to say. And these kids, they could tell he wasn't just humoring them. Okay, so he got them talking, then what? Well, once he understood where they were coming from, he made them an offer. He said, look, I get it. Life's tough right now, but causing trouble isn't going to make it any better. What if I taught you some skills that could help you build a future for yourselves? Zoltar grinned. At first they were skeptical. They thought he was just trying to trick them, but Sean, he wasn't fazed. He invited them into the warehouse, showed them around the workshop he'd set up. I bet that got their attention, Raxa said, imagining the looks on the young Barzan's faces as they took in the tools and equipment. Oh, it did. Especially when Sean started demonstrating some of the things he could do. He fixed a broken door lock right in front of them, then showed them how to rewire a malfunctioning light panel. Raxa let out a low whistle. Kids were probably in awe. I know I would have been at that age. Zoltar nodded. They were. And that's when Sean made his offer. He told them if they promised to stop harassing the humans and start helping out around the warehouse, he'd teach them everything he knew about mechanics and engineering. And they went for it? Raxa asked, raising an eyebrow. Not all of them. Some were still too proud or stubborn to accept help from an outsider. But a few of the kids, they saw the opportunity for what it was. A chance to learn valuable skills, to make something of themselves. Raxa shook his head, marveling at the turn of events. I gotta hand it to Sean, that's one hell of a way to turn a problem into a solution. Zoltar smiled. That's Sean for you. Always thinking outside the box, and it paid off too. Those kids who took him up on his offer, they became some of the hardest workers in the warehouse. Zoltar sighed, his eyes distant as he recalled the tragic events. Fear and ignorance can make people do terrible things, Raxa. The traditionalists, they couldn't see past their own prejudices. They couldn't understand that Sean was trying to build something better for everyone. But to resort to violence, to murder? Raxa's voice trembled with anger and grief. That's not the Barzan way, at least it shouldn't be. Zoltar nodded solemnly. You're right, it shouldn't be. But sometimes when people feel threatened, they lash out in the most brutal ways imaginable. Raxa closed his eyes, trying to picture the warehouse as it had been before that fateful night. The laughter of the children as they worked on their projects, the pride in their eyes as they learned new skills, the warmth and camaraderie that had filled every corner of the building. I can't even imagine what it must have been like for those kids, he said softly. To see their safe haven destroyed, to lose their mentor and friend in such a horrific way. Zoltar's expression was grim as he recounted the aftermath of the attack. It was chaos, Raxa. The kids were screaming, crying, trying to put out the fires and salvage what they could, but the damage was done. The warehouse was in ruins, and Sean and Brutus... He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Raxa felt a lump form in his throat as he pictured the gruesome scene. What about the attackers? He asked, his voice hoarse. Were they caught, punished? Zoltar shook his head. Some of them, yes, but others, they slipped away in the confusion, disappeared into the night like the cowards they were. Raxa slammed his fist on the bar, the impact reverberating through the empty glasses. It's not right, Zoltar, it's not fair. Sean and Brutus, they deserved better than this. They deserved justice. I know, my friend, I know. Zoltar's voice was heavy with sorrow. But in the end, perhaps the greatest justice we can hope for is that Sean's legacy will live on, that the seeds he planted will continue to grow, even in the face of such tragedy. Raxa nodded slowly, trying to take comfort in his friend's words. I hope you're right, Zoltar, I really do, because if there's one thing I know for sure, it's that Sean Bennett was a good man, a kind man, and he deserved so much more than what this universe gave him. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.